From KVUE News in Austin, you're watching Texas This Week with Ashley Goodo.
Good Sunday morning. We are just days away from the start of the 89th Texas legislative session, and one big question remains. Who will be the Speaker of the House? We get into it in just a minute, but first, let's get to the 3 things you need to know in Texas politics. There's a new Chief Justice on the Texas Supreme Court. Governor Greg Abbott announcing Justice Jimmy Blacklock will lead the state's highest court, replacing Chief Justice Nathan Hedge, who retired at the end of last year after serving 36 years on the court. Governor Greg Abbott is directing Texas DPS to step up its anti-terrorism efforts after the attack in New Orleans. That includes assessing the vulnerability of the Texas Capitol complex to vehicle ramming and other terrorist attacks and providing recommendations for security enhancements. The governor is also telling DPS to work with local law enforcement on security for special events. UT President Jay Hartzell is leaving the 40 acres. The Longhorn alum announced he's leaving at the end of the spring semester to serve as the next president of Southern Methodist University in Dallas. SMU leader Sheard Hartzell was unanimously voted in as the university's newest president. Hartzell faced criticism for the university's response to pro-Palestine protests last year, leading to more than 600 faculty members signing a letter of having no confidence in him. Hartzell is set to start as SMU's president on June 1st. The 89th Texas legislative session starts Tuesday, and tensions are already running high in the House of Representatives as 2 conservative Republicans battle it out to be the next speaker. Jasper Scherer, politics reporter for the Texas Tribune, joined me to preview the session. We are just days away from the start of the 89th Texas legislative session, and generally we go into this week knowing who will lead the House of Representatives. But as of us talking right now, it is still unknown.
Yeah, which is really unusual. Just, I think for every session in recent memory, going back decades, we've had at least some idea of who the House Speaker is going to be. And it's just such a critical position, for folks who aren't steeped in this stuff day to day. I mean, the House Speaker generally controls the flow of legislation. They have the bully pulpit to kind of, tell members what they do and don't want to pass. They generally install their allies to chair the key legislative committees that decide the fate of the big priority bills throughout the session. So the fact that we're kind of down to 2 candidates right now, state reps Dustin Burrows of Lubbock and David Cook of Mansfield up in North Texas. And we could talk more about some of the differences between those 2 lawmakers, but just the fact that we're heading into day 1 without knowing who's in charge of one half of this bicameral legislature is pretty striking.
Yeah. And well, let's get into it. You talked about the differences between the 2. They both have, their own set of allies, people who want to see them be the speaker. Talk to us about the big differences with them. David
Cook is kind of the chosen candidate of the farthest right wing of the party, generally speaking. This group, not only do they want to enact some of the most far-reaching conservative policies, whether we're talking about, requiring public schools to display the 10 Commandments in their classrooms, or, banning foreign entities from owning land in Texas, which are 2 priorities that didn't get through last session. But beyond that, it's also just a matter of how much power sharing will take place in the Texas legislature with Democrats, the minority party. Traditionally, they have the minority party, and this was Republicans as well when the Democrats were in charge decades ago, have been given some degree of power, been allowed to chair some of the less important House committees, that kind of stuff. David Cook and the folks supporting him in the House want to see a lot of that power taken away from Democrats, strictly prioritize Republican priority bills, that kind of stuff. On the other hand, Dustin Burrows, also a staunchly conservative member, but if he does become speaker, he's relying on a coalition that includes some Democrats. He has been not super specific on what he wants to do on some of these questions about Democratic power sharing, but One thing he has said is he wants to, rather than unilaterally eliminate Democratic committee chairs by his own decision, he wants to leave that up to the will of the House to decide next week.
If we learned anything from the last legislative session and those subsequent special sessions that we had in the 88th, it's that school choice or vouchers, whatever you want to call them, will be a primary focus this session. In fact, a lot of the members that you spoke of being elected new freshmen into the House were elected because of their stance on vouchers.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's, I think that the biggest issue, really by far coming into the session, at least politically, Governor Abbott has put a ton of political capital into this issue, and he's, going to be trying to crack the whip to try to drive this through the Texas House, especially. That has been the chamber that has held up vouchers or school choice historically. The tentative whip count, I guess, of members who support some form of private school vouchers in the House stands at right around 79 members or so. At least that's the number that Abbott is using. And, that does leave him with not a lot of room for error. You need 76 votes. If everyone is present in the House, you need 76 votes to get something through. And, some of these incoming members have never actually been on record talking about specifically the type of voucher program that they would support. So I think this issue is, some type of voucher program seems quite likely to pass, but, it very much remains to be seen what that program would look like, and also whether supporters of vouchers can arrive at something that a majority in the House can get on board with.
Yeah, certainly going to be interesting. And also the Senate, right? Because the Senate passed a much more conservative, limited, smaller, voucher program compared to what the House was considering last session. Obviously, vouchers a big deal. What are some of the other issues, though, that you think lawmakers are going to focus on this session?
Well, I think another issue that's tied really closely with private school vouchers is public school funding. That was something that did not get across the finish line 2 years ago. Bipartisan majorities in both chambers were in favor of injecting more money into the state's share of public school funding, so that some of that would have been earmarked for teacher raises, which is important just for addressing a shortage of teachers leaving the profession here in Texas. So that's a big one to watch. And that also a lot of that will stem from the state budget surplus, just how much money is available for lawmakers to spend. And a lot of other priorities will come from that too. Folks in both chambers from both parties are talking about continuing to shore up the state's water supply, spending money on these expensive infrastructure investments to create new sources of water as the state continues to gain population and, eventually run out of water, according to some of the projections out there. There's also continuing to shore up the power grid as well. And as I was mentioning before, just, property tax relief. The lawmakers passed a massive multi-billion-dollar property tax cut package 2 years ago. It sounds like there's appetite to do something similar this time around. So there are going to be a lot of competing interests for those dollars in the budget. And it's, a big part of this is just how that all gets distributed. I think a lot of these things are likely to pass, but it's just a matter of who gets, however many $1 billion, essentially.
The 89th Texas legislative session convenes Tuesday, January 14th at noon. Of course, we will be there with reports for you throughout the day. That's Texas This Week.